Planning your Camino. I'm going to share 6 things to think about coming right up. So it's that time of year where you might be planning a follow-up Camino. Maybe you've done a number of them, or you might be planning your first Camino, maybe you've been planning it for months. But I thought I'd share a few things that I find useful to think about when I'm planning a Camino, whether it's your first one or your 10th one. Some of the things that I sort of go through in my mind when I'm trying to pick a route. So there's lots of other elements of planning, of course, you know, what to pack and the weather and the time of year and so on. This year, this time, we're going to be talking about the route. And if that's interesting and useful, we can follow up with some more videos on other aspects of planning. So do please comment down below. So some of the things that I tend to think about, and I was reflecting on this. So this year was my 4th Camino, although it comprised of 3 Camino routes, one after another. And the sort of things that I thought through with these. First of all, number 1, the type of experience that I wanted. So prior to this year, I had only walked on the Camino Frances, and I wanted something a little bit different. So when you're thinking about your Camino, I'd suggest you think about the sort of experience that you want to have. And by that, I mean, do you want a very strong sense of community? Do you want to have lots of other pilgrims around you? Do you really want to be very much on your own and able to reflect and not have distraction? You know, that might point you towards one of the more remote Caminos. And there are other elements which we'll touch on in a moment about the sort of infrastructure and so on. But I think one of the first things you need to fix in your mind is what sort of experience you want to have. If it's your first Camino, you may prefer one with a few more people on it. So you've got some more social interaction and you're not sort of feeling too isolated. What I found on the more remote Caminos is that it tends to be popular with those who have walked a few Caminos already, so they kind of know what to expect. Although on the Via de la Plata, I did meet a lady from the Netherlands, I think, who was walking her first Camino. And I thought, wow, that's gutsy, picking that one for your first. So number 1, think about the type of experience that you want. Secondly, do you want to get a Compostela? So if you're new to this whole thing, the Compostela is the certificate that you get in Santiago de Compostela at the Pilgrims office. It's like your certificate of having undertaken the Camino and met all the conditions required, which we won't go into, but it's, you know, having walked the final 100 kilometers into Santiago or 200 on a bike and having gone to Mass and all that kind of stuff. So if you want that certificate, and I would suggest most first-time pilgrims would genuinely like to get, or generally like to get that certificate, then that's going to influence the route that you're going to walk as well, because you want to finish in Santiago. So in some of the other videos I talk about when planning your Camino, if you want to get that Compostela, something to consider is your time frame and how long you've got to walk. So if you're only walking, say, a Camino for 10 days, you're going to have to, and you want to finish in Santiago, you've got to kind of put the pin in Santiago, work back 10 days and kind of work out where your start point is. But as an example, if you didn't want to receive a Compostela, maybe you've got one already, you could walk from Sevilla to Zafra on the Via de la Plata and go home. You've got nowhere near Santiago, but at least you've had the Camino experience. So do think about whether getting that Compostela in Santiago is important to you, whether finishing your Camino in Santiago is important to you. I'd say generally it is, because that's kind of the whole purpose of the Camino. It's to walk to Santiago, to visit the relics of St. James and get your Compostela. But maybe if you've walked a few Caminos, you don't feel the need to do that, and you can enjoy some of the earlier elements without having to arrive in Santiago. So that's number 2. Number 3, the distance. Okay, so I touched on that briefly. There's a couple of elements of distance. If you're going to finish in Santiago, you obviously need to work out how long you're walking so that you can complete your journey into Santiago. When I was planning my Camino for this year, distance was relevant because I wanted to be on the road for quite a while. I wanted to walk a much longer Camino and to have that longer time for reflection and soul searching and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to walk more than, say, 800 kilometres from Saint-Jean. And so I picked the Via de la Plata, which is just over 1,000 kilometres into Santiago. And then I extended on to Finisterre and Murcia, bringing it up close to about 1,200. So distance is certainly a consideration when you're planning which route. Number 4, company. Do you want to have some company or not? And there's, again, a couple of elements to that. You can take your own company, so taking a partner with you or a friend. I've talked about this many times in other videos. Personally, my preference for that is to walk alone. I just find a Camino a much more enriching experience if I'm on my own. I don't like to be totally on my own. I like to meet other pilgrims, but being with somebody constantly, 24 hours a day, I find is a bit of a distraction from the whole thing for me. So if you want the company of lots of other people, whether you're walking alone or not, do you actually want the company of others around you, then you're probably going to pick one of the more popular routes. And those tend to be the Camino Frances, the Camino Portuguese, to a degree the Norte, some of the shorter ones, the Ingles, and so on. Finisterre I walked this year, was really nice. If you're going to walk the Camino Finisterre and you want a Compostela, just a quick tip, you have to walk it in reverse because you get the Compostela for finishing in Santiago. And walking from Finisterre to Santiago isn't quite enough. So you would have to walk from Murcia to Finisterre and then back to Santiago. But that's a wonderful route. I actually loved walking that. So I put that down as a really good short route. So that's in terms of company. Number 5, accommodation. What kind of accommodation do you prefer? So if you really want to have lots of private accommodation, if you're going to stay in hotels, casa rurales, which are like little bed and breakfast, hostels, you want private room, private bathroom, that kind of thing. Some of the more remote Caminos are probably not going to suit you because you won't have a lot of choice in terms of accommodation options. So again, the only remote one that I walked is, well, 2, the Via de la Plata and the Camino Invierno. Both of those had much more limited accommodation options than, say, the Camino Frances. So let me not digress too much, but I set out this year intending to stay in a lot of albergues because I haven't in the past. On those Caminos, you will need to stay in albergues from time to time because the options are fairly limited. So I actually set out with the intention of doing that, and that was part of the attraction of those routes. So I really enjoyed those albergue experiences. I think I stayed in about 15 all up. But think about the type of accommodation you want. So if you want to have that sort of immersive pilgrim experience of staying in albergues, any route's going to work for you generally for that. If you're one of those people who wants a little bit more privacy, for whatever reason, you want your private room, private bathroom, that can be a little bit more tricky on some of the more remote routes. I'm trying to think of, on the VDLP, there were probably 6 places where there was no private accommodation. And as I said, I picked albergues a lot of the time anyway, but there was probably maybe 6 towns or villages where that was the only option. So think about that. And then number 6, I'll mention luggage transport. It seems to be becoming a lot more popular these years on the Camino, that people will transport their packs or their luggage, day to day. I'm not here to judge you on that, whether if you want to do that or not, that's fine. Personally, it doesn't really suit me. I find it quite restrictive. I like the flexibility of just having a really light backpack and going where I want without having to be at particular places to pick up my luggage. But if luggage transfer is your thing for whatever reason, again, that's going to restrict you to a degree to certain routes. So the really popular routes will have luggage transport. Where there are lots of pilgrims, it makes the case to provide luggage transport. I mean, if you've got very few pilgrims walking on a route, why would you set up the service? It's going to be very hard to make any money at it. So Camino Frances, the Portuguese, I think the Norte has it. Yeah, pretty sure it has. Those sorts of routes definitely. On the Via de la Plata, on the early stages, the first 600 Ks or so, not really. there isn't really any luggage transport. I don't think there is on the Camino Madrid, which I'm hoping to do next. So investigate that a little bit. If you need to have luggage transport, that's going to narrow your options a little bit. Okay, so let's just kind of recap on that. So particularly if you're planning your first Camino, some things to think about. Most people seem to walk the Camino Frances and the Camino Portuguese as their first Caminos. I get that. I did. I walked the Camino Frances 3 times before I started venturing onto other Caminos. It's a wonderful Camino. But don't let that sort of limit your thinking, I guess. I think it's a wonderful first Camino. I haven't walked the Portuguese. People do love that as well. But let's just look at the sort of broader choices. So the things to think about, the type of experience you want. Maybe you don't want to have that sort of quite busy, very social sort of atmosphere that you get on those popular Caminos. Do you want to go to Compostela? So that's going to dictate whether you finish in Santiago or not. What sort of distance are you going to walk? You know, if you want to walk 500 kilometers, then the English is not going to cut it for you. I think it's 123. Do you want to have lots of company around you? You know, you can very easily look up online which are the most popular Caminos and which are the more remote ones. What kind of accommodation do you want? So the more remote ones will give you less choice. Because there are less people walking, there are less facilities available. People are not going to, you know, set up albergues and things if there aren't really people coming to stay there. So on the more remote ones, you get less choice. And then if you want luggage transfer, that's going to limit your choices as well. So there we go. Just a few things to think about on picking your Camino. If you've walked a few Caminos yourself, maybe comment down below on what other considerations would you suggest in picking a Camino. And if you're planning your first Camino, you have any questions or would like videos on particular topics, do comment down below, and I'll be more than happy to provide those. I love getting questions and comments because it gives me ideas for new videos. And I don't know how many videos we've got on the channel, well over 200, but at times I struggle to think of new topics. So if there's topics you want to hear about, do comment down below and I will certainly try my best to do videos on those or answer your questions. Are you walking a Camino in 2024? First one, which one are you going to walk? Maybe you're walking your 10th or 20th. Which one are you going to set out on? I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.